I'm totally full of surprises today. Okay, let's take a different view of things. Let's go ahead and move in a different direction right now. So last week I talked with you about Kenneth E. Hagin, Bible teacher, no longer with us, but someone who really, really helped me, and I believe his story can help you too, okay? So I'm going to put his story in my own words, but he made an illustration in one of his books about how the enemy can inject thoughts into our mind and persuade us to believe something even if we aren't even aware that it's happening. And I want to give you a real life example because I think this is going to make sense to you, okay? So basically, you guys, like me, may have heard of a situation where a man leaves his woman, his wife, or a wife leaves her husband, and you think, how could they do that? Why would they do that? What would persuade them to do that? You start to think about things like that, and sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't even know that person anymore. I thought I knew them, but how could they make a decision like that? How could they leave their family when they need them most, or whatever? So, that can happen in a marriage, in a relationship. So think about it like this. So this is a hypothetical example. Let's say that there's a woman, all right, and she's by herself. She's a married woman. She's got kids, but she's by herself. She's doing her everyday thing, maybe commuting to work, driving in a car. Maybe she's working at home, whatever. I don't know. But these thoughts come into her mind, something like this, okay? You're so beautiful. Your man, he's okay, but he's not as hot as he was 20 years ago when you first got married. You could do so much better. Heck, nobody appreciates you around here. You work so hard. Do you really want to be a stay-at-home mom right now in your life? And so this woman is just doing her daily thing, and she doesn't even recognize it at first because it starts out really subtle. But these thoughts start coming to her, thoughts like the ones I just mentioned. And if she's a smart woman, she's going to know right away, wait a minute, these thoughts are not my thoughts. God doesn't want me to get a divorce. God doesn't want me to leave my man, or whatever the situation is, And so she puts the thoughts down the first time, okay? Couple days later, she's by herself again. She's not really engaged in anything. She's just doing her everyday thing. And the thoughts start to come back to her, right? So maybe she gives place to the thoughts a little bit, but once again, she decides to shut that door to the wrong kind of thinking. In this case, it's not a fearful thought. It's a thought kind of in the other direction, but it's still a temptation kind of thought. So the thoughts come to her again. She's like, these are the thoughts. There's something like, you're such a beautiful woman. You could do so much better than your husband. He doesn't appreciate you anyway. Do you really want to be a stay-at-home mom the rest of your life? And you know what? It happens like that. Maybe for 4 or 5 days, she just keeps putting it down and putting it down. But after the thoughts come back and she doesn't take her authority, shut the door of her mind to the wrong thinking, then if she's maybe a little weaker, like on the inside, she starts to say to herself, wait a minute, that's right. She takes those thoughts as her own. She starts thinking, my husband doesn't appreciate me. My kids don't appreciate me either. You know what? I am pretty good looking. I'm a beautiful woman. If I look hard enough, I could probably find another man and have a totally different kind of life. On second thought, I need a man who does workouts. I need a man who, takes care of his body, who pumps iron, whatever. But as soon as you give place, as soon as this person would give place to that kind of thinking, then suddenly, there are things that will happen to her during the day. Maybe her husband had a bad day at work, comes home that day after she's been bombarded with all these thoughts, and is kind of grumpy with her or irritable. Well, that's only going to feed the thoughts that she's now giving place to over and over again in her thinking. And the same thing can happen to a man. He can start to entertain thoughts. He can start to let them make a home in his mind. Thoughts about how your wife was prettier 30 years ago when you married her, and hey, there's this young thing at the office. She seems to really respect you and appreciate the power that you have. Maybe this man is a CEO of a company. She really seems to respect you and admire you, and she looks up to you and tries to encourage you. You're a big businessman and all this and all that. Well, if that man isn't careful, and if he's not committed to his wife, he can start to listen to those thoughts, those suggestions from the enemy. Now again, we've talked a lot about fear, anxiety, depression thoughts. These are not those same kind of thoughts. But I want you to see how the enemy can work, and it can be with anything. But you know what? You've got to know the Bible. You've got to be committed to your wife or to your husband, come heck or high water, you got to be committed. Or when those thoughts come to you, you might start to like them too much, and you might start to take them as your own thoughts. And with time, the example that Kenneth Hagin gave in his book, this woman, after months of hearing these thoughts, she decided to give in to it, and she eventually left her husband, and she eventually left her faith in God and just totally abandoned her husband and decided to do something different. But because she gave place to those thoughts, she didn't do what she was supposed to do, right? She didn't do the right thing. Now listen, I want to say this too. I'm not sitting here today judging divorce and divorce situations. I'm just giving you a hypothetical example, all right? And actually, Jesus visited Kenneth Hagin lots of different times in his life. I shouldn't say lots, it was 3 or 4 times, and actually had conversations with him. And this was an example that he showed him. I kind of massaged the story a little bit so that it wouldn't be incriminating to anybody. But this is an example that Jesus talked to him about and showed him, trying to help him to see how the enemy can inject thoughts into our mind and can try to take over our thinking to get us to do something that we wouldn't normally do, or to get us to try to feel a certain way that we shouldn't feel. Now, that was interesting, but I want to give you my own example, okay? So I made some notes because I remember being a kid, probably about 8 years old, and I remember one of the first times that the fear thoughts started to come into my mind. Like, I remember when it started, and I want to share that with you because I think it'll help you, okay? So I remember where I was when I heard for the first time my first fear thought. It was when I was a kid, about 8 years old. It was a gloomy day in Indiana, and it was the weekend. There was nothing to do. I didn't have any friends around. I had just walked down the street that day to go see if one of my friends was at her house that day. She wasn't home. I had knocked on the door, and I was walking back up this big hill to get back to my house. Well, I had been, it was just kind of that time of year, right? A little gray. For those of you who are watching and you're from like the northern part of the United States, gray and dreary. But anyway, it was just kind of that season, all right? And a couple days before, maybe it was like 2 nights before, I was doing some spying in my house, and I had overheard a conversation between my mom and a family member of ours. And I remember in the conversation, my mom was bothered by what this family member was saying. He was sharing something that could be really scary, and she totally was afraid. I remember that about her. She was afraid. She was saying, well, when is this going to happen, and how will we know that it's about to happen, and what are we going to do when it does happen, things like that. But I noticed my mom becoming really worried and upset. Okay, fast forward back to walking home from my friend's house. Ever since I had heard that conversation, it made an impression on me. No kid likes to see their mom upset. And I was just feeling kind of down anyway because of the time of year, and because I didn't have any friends to hang out with, whatever. Well, as I was walking back home, this thought came into my mind. Are you ready? This thought came into my mind. I thought to myself, man, I just feel kind of down and depressed. I don't like feeling this way. And I remember the thought came to me, you're going to feel this way forever. And I think I even stopped on the street and just thought about it a second time. I'm going to feel this way forever. And then the thought came to me again, you're never going to be able to stop feeling this way. And I felt kind of down. I just told you why. I felt kind of sad, kind of depressed. But I remember that thought coming to me. I was a kid. I didn't know that was the devil. I didn't know anything that I'm sharing with you right now. And there was no one in my life who could really tell me that, right? But in that moment, I remember hearing that. You're going to feel this way forever. Like, you're never going to be able to stop feeling this way. And I remember, I think we were on like a school vacation. And so for the next few days, or for the weekend, I was at home and I was trying to get those thoughts out of my mind. And I remember that as a kid, I felt like I wasn't able to. I felt like I didn't have any way to get those fear thoughts out of my mind. And I didn't want to keep feeling that way. But I didn't have I didn't know on the inside what to do then, like I know what to do now. I didn't know that I could immediately shut that door to the fear and I could go ahead and go on. I could go ahead and enjoy my day, even though it was cloudy, kind of dreary outside. I could go ahead and enjoy my day, even though I didn't have friends to hang out with, whatever. I didn't know then what I know now. So what does this mean for you? How does this apply to you? I want you to see, for me, that's what happened to me. But I want to ask you, maybe you can think about, if you're someone who's struggled for a really long time, maybe you can think about where you were the first time you heard the lie. And you didn't know it was a lie then, but now you know it's a lie. Now you know that you don't have to think about whatever just falls into your mind. Now you know that you have a right to think your own thoughts. If I had known then what I know now, then I wouldn't have suffered the way that I did all those years, because that day, that experience was just like a stepping stone to things getting really ugly later in life. It was a progression. And you know, that's how the enemy works. He's pretty smart. He's been around for a long time. He's studied us human beings for a long time, and he knows how to get your goat. But let me tell you, you don't have to be somebody who gets their goat gotten, all right? So I want to say something to you. This is something Oral Roberts said, and I really like this. He said, no fear is a small fear if it's your fear. Think about that. No fear is a small fear if it's your fear. And that's how good God is. That's how much he loves you today. And that's how much he can turn your life around. If something is a big deal to you, it's a big deal to him. Even though your fear might be like so embarrassing, you don't even want to say it out loud to somebody, that's okay. I know people who are afraid of clowns. I know a person who's afraid of balloons. Someone from the United States. Anyway, whatever. God can help you turn it around. And when something is a big deal to you, it's a big deal to God. This is Brigit with Created to Conquer. If you like what I've got to say, I want you to hit subscribe and I want you to ring that little bell, and we'll talk again soon.